Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to this little podcast. Tim Bushong.
Jason Gingrich. In this room,
Yeah.
one of our elders has the story to tell of my grandfather in the middle of a service taking a hardbacked hymnal and absolutely whacking him on the back of the head during a service.
Was he just being loud or something?
He was being too animated in some form.
He was being too 8 years old.
And Grandpa drilled him. I think he was a teenager. And Grandpa drilled him. Yeah. So.
Oh gosh, that reminds me of the Sweeney when the cops will look back on the old days when we could get a confession in 5 minutes. Just close the door. Anywho, so last time we were talking about reforming doctrine, and of course, if you're thinking in terms of reforming anything, reforming. I mean, if we're going to have a revival, which is the only hope for our land, there's got to be reformation in the church.
Right.
And so this work that we're trying to do isn't just to please me or get my way or you get your way, but it's to get God's church reformed in line back to, what does it say? Be conformed to the image of Christ, into that mold of biblical revelation. So we were talking a little bit about how people would hear one thing and recast it so they could agree with that thing, but it ends up meaning something entirely different.
Right.
What, in your experience, what's probably the one, because you were talking about the sovereignty of God, how do people do that? Yeah. How does that work?
I mean,
it's a two-step.
Here, and it's, all over, but the concept of libertarian free will, which they wouldn't even call libertarian free will, they would just go free will.
Free will.
That is the centerpiece of evangelical doctrine. Our free will is that holy grail. In fact, I teach very part-time at a university whose motto is "With Christ at the helm." And I have suggested in years past that it be renamed "With Libertarian Human Free Will at the helm."
With me at the helm.
To be a little more reflective of what's taught in the Bible. But that's the centerpiece. So
I'm not going to say who it is, but it rhymes with a gas we used to have called ethyl. Sorry.
University. And so here I think that free will ends up being that thing that you can hold on to. Like, we're committed to this, and then these other things, yes, but they got to fit into this. Yeah. It's that pair of glasses you put on, that lens you're looking through. So everything fits into that. Yeah. Everything's colored by it. So you'll talk about the sovereignty of God. You'll talk about what everything, and for many people it is, I would say for handful, I guess it's like that thing, anything with change in any organization, 20% of the people are going to go with you immediately, 20% are never going with you, and that middle 60%, you just need time and patience. And I'm sure we'll get into that as we get into practice in the church next time. Next time we talk about reforming our practice in the church. But it's sort of the same way. You got 20 people who are like, wait a minute, you're teaching something that contradicts this. You got a middle group. It's going to take them a while to get there, but they're eventually going to see that. And then you got this other group. They're never going to put those pieces together. They're always going to hold on to and
because I just want things to go back to the way they were. And that was this guy, and he taught this.
Free will is the centerpiece of that. And
I can't remember who said it, but they said the concept of libertarian human free will is the Helen of Troy, that they will cross hill and ocean and dale in order to go to protect. And they'll do anything.
They believe, in a church like this one, in a church like yours, in most evangelical churches, what they believe they're protecting in that is God's good name. And God would never do this or do that. No. And they're thinking of their loved ones
Many times.
They're thinking of their loved ones who are lost, or their loved ones who have abandoned the faith, or they're thinking, and their hearts are breaking. They desire them to be saved.
And the idea that God would pass them over. But they're not even thinking about that. They're thinking the idea that God wouldn't do everything within his infinite sovereign power to bring that person to faith.
Right. And you and I'm sure, have sat with people side by side and said to them many times, you really want your idiot cousin being the one who decides?
That's my quote, idiot cousin is me, but thank you, yes.
Yeah.
I agree, 100%. Yeah. You really want that person in charge of whether they make the right choice or not?
Right.
Oh.
It's... And so no matter what, you'll walk through any number of passages in yes and amen. Mm-hmm. Also, it has to work this way. It has to be that we have the final say. And that has been the central. And most people are not belligerent about it here in my context. They have not been. Yeah.
It's in the air you breathe.
Yeah.
It's everything.
Yeah.
Well, and by extension then, if that's not true, then all of those 20, 25-minute long altar calls were unnecessary.
Right.
That was just emotional manipulation. And then you have to look back and say, that's what I did. And you either repent of it or you're going to double down and say, yes, and by gum, many people are saved through the use of that practice. Yeah. And I'm not stopping now.
Right. That and you do have to. I mean, it's the same as wherever people are at in their beliefs and in their practice, someone they love got them there, and so you have to tread lightly, and be sensitive and go. No, I'm not throwing out your conversion.
Right.
I'm not doing that at all. I'm not saying that the Lord hasn't worked through the means of the altar call. What I'm saying is we don't read about it in Scripture.
Right.
We can trace historically where it came from.
Yeah, that's right.
We know why it was put into practice. And
rhymes with Banks's wrench.
Yeah. How many countless false professions of faith have been made, and people walking around under condemnation from God, unregenerate, who think they're saved because they walked an aisle.
Yeah. Shook the preacher's hand.
Right.
Raised it up, signed the card. We all grew up with this, man.
Yeah.
A Christian rock band came through my high school back in, early 90s. I was just getting started in Christian music. I thought, I'll go there and support the team, They were from Russia. Guess what the name of the band was? Russia.
Wow.
And they did the whole Fellowship of Christian Athletes thing. You just walk them through this. You assure them that they're saved. I mean, it was horrible. It didn't make any sense. Uh-huh. And all of that has to do with your fundamental belief in A, who God is, B, who is man, that you are mindful of him,
right,
and C, how a holy God is reconciled to sinful man.
Right.
If you have that wrong, then your practice, again, we're jumping way ahead, but your practice is going to reflect that.
Yeah.
You're going to say, well, do everything within reason, I guess.
Right. Everything outside, what's the expression from a lot of the attractional churches? Anything outside of sin we will do to see someone won to Christ.
And even that, I'm
pretty
concerned.
Sure playing Hell's Bells Easter Sunday morning, there was some sin involved, or...
I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to call timeout.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in looking at this from just doctrine as its own value, doctrine as being this reflects God's truth. It sounds like we're both kind of talking about very similar set of presuppositions and beliefs that arise from the text. They're exegetical. It's not because I read a book. It's not because I heard a tape.
Right.
Tape. What's that? So how then you take your core convictions and translate that into the official position of the church when not everybody is quite there yet.
Yeah.
Now that's a challenge.
That is a challenge. What we did here, and you come into a church. Now, I this is not how it worked for you, but I came into a church and inherited elders.
That's right.
These are the elders you got. These are your guys.
That's right.
And there's a lot to work out there. Are these men qualified? Mm-hmm. If they're not qualified, but they're already elders, are they now disqualified? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Organ. Great card. You have to have an organist to play it. And unfortunately, it is completely worthless until that time. So I know people who really are excited about this card, and they've had it in their deck for ages, and decades even, and they still haven't pulled a organist in any of their pack openings. So it's just been sitting in their deck useless. So keep that in mind if you add it. J.C. Ryle quote. This is great. J.C. Ryle, if you're not familiar with this catalog of work, is excellent. So if you don't know him, check him out. He's great. Final pull of the day, Jesus knocking painting. This is a standard Arminian church accessory. Typically, it's going to go in any deck that has an Arminian build. As you can see, Jesus is knocking at the door. There is no handle on his side. It is your prerogative to open the door or not. I've heard rumors, people have talked, there is a Calvinism alternative to this card where Jesus is in full SWAT gear, busting the door down to go to bring life to a dead, sinful corpse of a sinner. But I've yet to see it. I don't know if it's just that rare or if it just is a rumor that it's out there. But either way, I could see why it's not popular, wouldn't look super great hanging on a church wall. But that's all we got for today. Thank you for stopping by. If you liked the video, like, subscribe, comment. But we're happy to have you in any capacity here. So thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you next time on the next pack opening of Grandma's Church.
So one of the things that we did, and we had a statement of faith here that I believe was 9 bullet points, 9 sentences. 2 of those 9 were wasted on foot washing and handshaking. So really 7 doctrinal points. Yes, that kind. Palsy.
Wait. 9 points.
9 bullet points. One was we believe in extending the right hand of fellowship, and another was we believe in foot washing.
Wow.
And so 7 points of doctrine, which was fine. Those were fine. That was the basis.
As far as they went.
Yeah. So what I propose to the elders is let me put together a significant statement to work through with you. And we'll just work through it word by word. And you tell me, you raise the issues you've got.
Yeah.
And instead of calling it our statement of faith, I call it our statement of doctrine. And instead of starting with the words we believe, I started with the words we teach.
Okay, right.
This is what will be taught in this church.
Yeah.
And from there, I was able to have a much more substantial set of things and walk through things like, we are going to be teaching election. Mm-hmm. Here's where we see it in Scripture. And walk through that with the elders. What ended up happening was they were like, great, yeah, let's do that. But we didn't have to go over the hurdle of saying, we've all signed on to this. Right. And so to be a member of this church, we have a statement of core beliefs, which are the core evangelical, gospel, irreducible. If you don't believe these, you can't be a member because you're not a Christian.
The fundamentals.
And then we have a large statement of doctrine. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to say of that, I will not be divisive about anything on this list.
Gotcha.
And so that enables us to have I want people to know what they're getting into when this is what you're going to hear taught.
Right.
And not, you sneak in and 6 months later, you find it. You believe what? No, I want
like
it
the
all out there.
Mormons do with their baptized acolytes.
Right.
Fill them in later.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. And, sometimes people will look at confessions of faith as being these straitjackets and we can't put God in a box. And I'm like, you just did that statement, put God in a box. Well, no, but, any creed or confession is just a sign of God's judgment. So you just made a creed and confession out of not liking creeds and confessions.
Yeah.
No creed but Christ. That's a great creed. I got it. I got it. So what did Christ say about such and such? And then you start explaining it and you're doing systematic theology and you're like, why didn't we just have a codified statement of faith to begin with?
Yeah.
Instead of this weird, because, in this area, there's kind of a hesitancy to go, well, I don't want to be beholden to that. Listen, what you just said, it shows where a man stands. Right. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm not trying to put you in some kind of straitjacket theology. I just want to know what you believe about A, B, or C.
Right.
And that's helpful.
Yeah.
To both the congregation and to the leadership.
Right.
That way, as you said, people don't come into a situation and 6 months into it says, oh, by the way, I don't know if you knew this or not, but we believe in a no rapture, post-tribulation, preterist view. And wait a minute, I don't even know what that is.
Right.
Well, but it's what we believe.
Right.
And the same for the pastors. You're not going to get people that, like you say, I'm not going to be divisive over this, even though I'm not quite sure I see exactly what it is here or agree with it. But that's not my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. For us, it was not quite that difficult. As you said, I came into a situation where there's no deacons and there's no elders.
Right.
So I'm it. Mm-hmm. That's why you got some phone calls from me.
Right. Yeah.
I was supposed to be calling someone else. They wouldn't return my call. So I'm calling who will listen. Uh-huh. So between you, Chris Neiswanger, the Presbyterian friend of ours, precious death. You might remember him as Chris Scott, the metal god. Great guy, very helpful. And just other men can't begin to explain. So what we did, but here's the thing: I had the support of all of the new folks, plus some of the old folks. And let me tell you, there were two women that everyone said, "Watch out! They're the matriarchs. You're going to fight them tooth and nail." Well, guess what? Reverse that. They were the most supportive. Mm-hmm. They were like, nope. Sounds like he's able to lead. We've never had a guy lead before. Mm-hmm. This is good. And I wasn't. Right. Now, some people would say, well, that's just being a dictator and getting your way and stuff. I'm like, well, chart a course. I mean, make it happen. And here's what's interesting, too. Your church bylaws are important. Yeah. It's not quite doctrine, but it's like, again, here's what we agree to do in these areas of practice. Mm-hmm. And we're assuming that these are based upon principles that, at least by extension, you could apply to this local church. Well, in their constitution, anything about the worship service, guess who's in charge of it?
Right.
The pastor. Mm. It's not something you vote on.
Right.
In congregational systems, which I sort of agree with the guy that said every church is, at the end of the day, in some way congregational because people vote with their feet. It's going to happen. Yeah. And I know there are pitfalls within Presbyterian forms. We just went through it. Episcopal forms, Methodist Church going through it, and congregational forms, which we go through. Mm-hmm. So what does the congregation vote on? Installation of new elders, deacons, members. I think that's critical. But the church doesn't vote on whether you're going to believe such and such or not. Right. Unless it's with their feet. Yeah. And guess what? That happened.
Right. Yep. Here too.
Yep. So when we ended up re-examining the church bylaws and constitution, there was a paragraph in there that now I understand came about in the post World War II era, post Volstead Act, that's prohibition, where it basically said nobody who is a member, especially in leadership, can partake of or participate in the distribution of alcoholic beverage. Now, people are like, well, I thought you were going to talk about doctrine. Well, we are. So, good doctrine says that whatever violation of God's law or failure to conform with it, that sin. Is drinking alcohol a violation of God's law?
Right.
And I already knew there were at least, okay, I'm thinking, I'm going like this because we have pews in front of us, right? I know he has a beer on the weekend. I know he's got some Jack Daniels in the barn by the milk house. I drink with him. I've had, and that person likes a glass of red wine with their Italian food.
Right.
I said, so are we all going to just be hypocrites here?
Right.
So that was the first thing I did.
Okay.
And I think that could be put under practice, but it's not practice of the church. It's that, listen, do you believe the Bible?
Yeah.
Yes. What does the Bible say about so-and-so? Well, it says no excess, because that's drunkenness. Great. Does that then by extension mean? And then,
right.
And that was a unanimous vote. Let's just get rid of that. I rephrased it to say, to put in drunkenness.
Yeah.
Because we are talking about the abuse of a thing.
Right.
So that was cool. And then as I kept going over the Constitution, I realized there's stuff in here we have nothing to do with. It doesn't apply to our church at all. Doesn't make any sense. And at the same time, I'm like, and I can't really say I'm with the Baptist faith and message because I don't believe it's accurate. I think it's weenie over here, the regeneration precedes faith. But over here it says.
Right.
So I suggested that we ground ourselves in a doctrinal standard that has stood the test of time, that's already prepared. In fact, it was a reiteration of another doctrinal standard, the Westminster. But of course, we all know that the Baptists wrote a statement of faith before Westminster was written. Westminster was better. Yeah, what they spend. How much time does it take, right? And then the Baptists are like, that's good. And we're not Anabaptists. So let's make sure everyone knows we're not Anabaptists. Right. We'll sign on to this with a couple caveats here, a couple changes.
Couple improvements.
Yeah, improvements. Thank you. Let's reform it. I just ticked some guys off, but it's okay. And I also said at the same time that, okay, this is so we know if there's another teacher or deacon or elder, we know where they stand.
Yeah.
Now, for the congregation, this is a lot to take in. How many chapters, right? How about we have this be the standard for everyone, including the elders, but especially so that you don't have to become so right away commensurate and knowledgeable of the 16. So it was the New Hampshire Confession of Faith.
Okay.
It's a distillation. Has a lot more in there about the return of Christ than does the 1689, that's for sure. And everyone was agreeable to it. I said, I sent out the New Hampshire to everyone, the email, I printed copies. I said, I want you to read this and get to know it. If there's anything in here that you can't sign on to. And it wasn't to get people to be members again. We're grandfathering clause,
sure.
grandfather, anyone else in. But I said, this is so that the church can say, this is what we believe. If you want to ask us, what do we believe about women pastors? Well, since we believe that the Bible is God's inerrant, infallible word,
right, and
our only infallible source for all faith and practice,
right, therefore,
we don't believe in women pastors. And so that actually, that passed without much problem. And I think as we began to grow numerically, after a few families left, there were some things we'll talk about in our next episode, but a few families left that just, and I I honestly don't think it was about doctrine at all. I think they were just frustrated with it not being the kind of lighthearted, breezy, hey there, buddy, what did I tell you, brother John, that right? That kind of stuff from the pulpit.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff for whatever. And there's some practical applications to that too. But that way we became, in essence, a confessional Reformed church within the Southern Baptist Convention.
Right.
Now, we had already signed up with, we're a founders church. I ended up having to take us off the 9 marks thing. 2020 happened. I'm sorry, guys. But we're still grounded in that, the faith that the first signers of the Baptist Convention, the first delegates, messengers, were to a man from Calvinistic and Reformed Baptist, either associations or churches. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's on board, but as we teach through the Bible, we continue to grow.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some other doctrinal issues that may be dispensational 7H, may be pre-wrath rapture of the church, contentious to some people.
Remember, if you like what you see here and if you appreciate the ministry of Reforming Grandma's Church, please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.
When we come